Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for all being here with us today. My name is Ahlam Bolooki. I'm the director of this wonderful festival, the Emirates Airline Festival of Literature, the largest celebration of the written and spoken word in the region. Before we start our conversation today, I'd like to thank our parent organization, the Emirates Literature Foundation, our founding partners, Dubai Culture, our head title sponsors, Emirates Airline, and today's session sponsor, Dubai Tourism. It so happens that throughout the course of my career, I've always had strong women who have been my mentors, my role models, my managers, who have seen the potential in me and given me the opportunity to rise, to shine, to grow, to teach me. So I really value the conversation that we're going to have today, and I appreciate what it's going to mean for all of you who are with us here today. Her Excellency Reem Al Hashimy is the Minister of State for International Cooperation at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and she's also led the bid for the Dubai World Expo from day one to this celebration, this spectacular ray of hope of everything that's good in the world in one place. It's blown our minds, and it's brought such an incredible energy into the UAE. And Indra Nooyi is the former chairperson and CEO of Fortune 500 company PepsiCo. She's a role model for women all over the world. Her long-awaited memoir, My Life in Full, is a very honest and eventful telling of her career and personal journey, and a New York Times bestseller that me, and I'm sure many of you in the audience, have really enjoyed. I look forward to discussing it today, and please join me in welcoming Her Excellency Reem Al Hashimy and Indra Nooyi. Please. It's a pleasure to be here with both of you, and I would say welcome, but in reality, we are all guests of Her Excellency Reem Al Hashimy here today, so thank you for hosting us. And I know that the place that we're in today is about looking into the future, into looking at the world that could be possible, but I want to go back in time a little bit and talk about some of the early life memories of your childhoods, which you feel would have planted the seed for what you achieved later on in life. If we could start with you, Indra. Your grandfather comes to mind.
Yes, but before I get there, Ahlam, I just want to tell everybody here how delighted I am to be at the Dubai Expo, because I came here in 2017, and Reem here gave me a tour of what the Dubai Expo was going to be. It was just desert land, nothing else. And we got into a Jeep, and Reem drove me around the entire campus and said, this is where the UAE pavilion is going to be. This is where the US pavilion is going to be. This is where the parking lot is going to be. It was just land. But listening to Reem, I knew that this expo was going to happen, because she had vision, she had leadership, the spark was in her eye, and I'm just so happy that it came to life through COVID, through all the crisis. And I am in awe of what you've accomplished, Reem. I really, really am in awe. Let's give her a big round of applause. Just the most remarkable person, a remarkable leader, and just a spectacular person. I'm glad I know you, Reem, really. It's wonderful to be here. All of us are in many ways a product of our childhood and upbringing. And in my case, I was lucky to be born into a family which was educated, and basically said the girls should be educated as much as the boys. We are not going to hold the girls back. Not only are you going to be educated, we're going to help you do your education the right way. If you have a problem with the subject, we'll lean in to help you. We'll make sure that you can dream, you can soar, you can do whatever you want. And my mother, who was a product of the community and the society, said, but I have to get them married off at age 18, which is typical for mothers in south of India at that time. And my father and grandfather said, absolutely not. They're going to be allowed to do whatever they want. And I was allowed to play in a rock band. I played cricket. I did everything that women don't do. And maybe all of that was a harbinger of what was coming later on. But at that time, it just felt like I was breaking the rules, and it felt good. And I never did anything bad, don't get me wrong. But I tested the limits of what women could do in India. And I thank my grandfather and my father, who were big factors, and my mother, who allowed all this to happen, even though society could have told her, you're nuts to allow your daughters to do what they're doing. So I'm lucky to have born into that family, and lucky to be here today with Reem talking to you about it.
That's wonderful, and we're all grateful for that moment in your childhood that you had. And Your Excellency, what could you also, to paint a clearer picture for young people who are with us in the audience today, what was your childhood like? Were you excelling academically? Were you involved in extracurricular activities? Would love to know a little bit more about the younger Reem.
Thank you so much, Ahlam, and thank you, Indra, and thank you all for being here with us. You really make this expo special, and I'm very honored that it has been able to attract as many visitors, as many thinkers, as many students as we have to date. And maybe just building on Indra's story, I remember when I was explaining to her what this expo is, and obviously she's a mentor, a guide, and an inspiration, frankly, not just for women, but for men as well, given just how much she's done in her life and continues to do. And so I remember as I was describing all of it to her, she believed me. She believed that we would do this. And that her conviction in how we were going to deliver it meant for me that we were actually going to deliver it. And here I'll dovetail to your question, Ahlam. It's really important to be surrounded by people who believe in you. And they don't need to be many. You need to obviously believe in yourself, but when you have a family, when you have a teacher, when you're in a society and in ours where Sheikh Mohammed constantly talks about achieving the impossible and making the impossible possible, we are reminded just by the sheer power of the human spirit. And so as I was growing up, I was so much of a bookworm. I loved academia. In fact, I always thought I would move into the space of professorship or academia in general. But I really benefited and was guided by those mentors in my life, both as a young student, but then also in government work. And those came in the form of men and women, but certainly when we were working on this expo, I think just the trust from His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid, a higher committee under the leadership of Sheikh Ahmed. When we told them we wanted to do all of this, they went with it, and I think that's a signal of really remarkable conviction. And I have to here also mention something about my school. I graduated from high school when I was 16 years old, so pretty young before going to college. But that school, with those teachers, with those administrators, always believed in each child being able to do everything. And that, coupled with my home, was an environment that was just a power dynamic that I think helped me and many, many others get to where we are today.
Ahlam, one of the big things that I think about always, and I've been thinking about it since I met Reem, how many other Reems are there in the region who could be such a leader, can make magic out of nothing, manage through crisis? It's a lesson in leadership. But I honestly believe if Reem was not the leader, it may not have happened this way. That's my biased perspective. Hey, that's my point of view. I'm sure everybody here agrees too. But the fact of the matter is that, see that? So I just think that if given the opportunity, I think there are so many gems in the region like Reem, women who have great potential, just need to be given a chance to shine.
Absolutely, and as an Emirati, young woman who is also in business and has a lot of ambitions. We do very much look up to Your Excellency, and I completely agree about the school that we went to when we were younger, and I went to the same school. And we have Ms. Elisar, our school principal, sitting in the front row, always supporting us in every event. And
You did good.
she did very good. And this kind of support from a very young age, all throughout life, shows us the power it has when women believe in other women and just support. But I want to talk about, if we go back into, Indra, you were quite young when your father got into a life-threatening accident. How old were you at that time?
Yeah, it was 10 or 12, maybe 11, yeah, something like that, yeah.
So very young to feel in a position where, having that fear of if he doesn't recover, you and your family would be in a very difficult financial situation. So what does that do to a 10 to 12-year-old?
It's interesting. When it happened, my mother, my grandfather basically did not make us feel like he's not going to recover. They kept telling us he's going to be okay. And my mother kept saying, I'm praying 3 or 4 hours a day, and my prayer will make sure he recovers. So as kids, we never ever were frightened that we could be on the road, be in the streets. In retrospect, when I was writing the book, I was thinking back to that accident and saying to myself, had my father not been able to go back to work, what could we have done? Okay? Because, my mother would have figured out a way to do something, but she hadn't gone to college. Women were not welcome in business those days. What could she have done? And then you extrapolate from that and say, you never know when a family is going to be beset by crisis. Families are fragile. Families are messy. There are going to be problems. When that happens, what is a support structure for women in particular who have the responsibility for the children and don't have the ability to make a living? So I come back full circle and say, we have to make sure the girl child is educated, that the girl child has the ability to have some economic freedom and financial ability to earn something on her own. I just worry about that because I know too many cases where women struggle because the families have broken up and they have to fend for themselves. So as I think back to my father's accident, in retrospect, it made me really afraid of what could have happened. Okay, and I'm not alone. There are a lot of others who've been through that.
But do you think that was always in the back of your mind when when you work so hard to achieve in life, or was it not?
Well, my father's accident, probably not, but I knew that I wanted to have the power of the purse. I wanted to be economically independent and stand on my own 2 feet. And interestingly, my father, all through his life, and my grandfather said to the girls, we're educating you because we never want you to put your hand out to anybody and say, give me money. Nobody. We don't want you to do that to your husband, to your in-laws, nobody. Never put out your hand and say, give me money to run the house or to buy something for yourself. Your education is the biggest dowry we gave you. It's the biggest investment we made in you. We want you to stand on your own 2 feet. To me, that represents a very progressive family, especially in conservative South India at that time. Very progressive family, and I am so glad they said that to me.
Wonderful. And Your Excellency, what propels you to have, to push hard and have this limitless ambition?
I think in many ways, it's the allure of what is possible. One of our biggest concerns as an Expo team was, what if we just delivered something regular? After that very last day, we'd wake up on April 1st and would have looked back and said, could we have done more with this? That was a nightmare situation for me. If you asked me then, what is it that I feared the most? It wasn't that we wouldn't finish on time or the exhibitions wouldn't be nice or that we wouldn't get X number of visitors. It was always around what if we didn't properly use this global platform of human solidarity to the absolute maximum? I think what constantly pushes my team and I is that strive for excellence, not because we want to be better or we want to compare or compete with any other past expo or any other past achievement. It's because we owe it to ourselves, our families, our communities to do the absolute best we ever could at this given moment and time. And so anything half-baked, anything sloppy, anything not well thought out, anything that just, in Arabic we say mashi halak, just like make do, that's poison. And which is why when you look at how this site was designed and you look at the programs that were delivered, when we talk about focusing on elements of dignity in the exhibitions from countries, or focusing on the importance of worker welfare, or focusing on the importance of sustainability, we had to honor that across that entire value chain from A to Z. Or we shouldn't say that that's what we're doing. And in a way, it's just being more thoughtful, Ahlam, being more meaningful, and really focusing on impact. Because we are at a day and age now, and certainly COVID has taught us this. Don't do things for the sake of doing them. Don't do things for a great PR moment. There are plenty of PR moments. They will continue to happen forever and ever and ever. Surely what you do has to have impact. Otherwise, all this effort, 192 countries, millions of people, hundreds of thousands of school children, all together, and we fall flat, that's not going to happen. And I think, we have we always set high expectations for ourselves. And certainly that's what's always driven me. And certainly what, drives my team, maybe mad sometimes, but drives my team nonetheless. Who, I think if you think of this expo, you need to also recognize the thousands who do so much, so well. I wish I knew all their names, but I know that without them, none of us could have had this experience, and certainly none of us could have had the legacy. I look at my trajectory as, frankly, only the beginning, in the sense of my need for constant contribution. How do we serve our society? How do we serve our community? How do we serve our families? And that concept of service is something that I think I'll carry all the way, inshallah.
Right, and I mean, that impact is 100% palpable, because to tell you, like a nonprofit organization like ours, a literature foundation, we announced our festival program in the Dome this year, and without this incredible structure, without the access that the Expo provided, we would never be able to put the names of 180 authors on a structure like this. I think it's unheard of that the arts is glorified in that way and in the way that it deserves, and we are just one stakeholder of many. So I think the impact is definitely something that everybody feels. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the big moments in your careers, and Indra, the moment that you were given the CEO position of PepsiCo, and what that was like. Your Excellency, you were a minister in your 20s, and the day that you got the call about bidding for the World Expo. If you could tell us about that moment, we'd love to live that vicariously through you.
It's actually anticlimactic when you tell you, because I decided to take a week off and organize the house. I was all by myself at home, and I told the office I'm taking staycation 1 week. I'm going to organize the closets, I'm going to hang pictures, I'm going to do everything I've never done. I was too busy. Monday morning, I had a list of everything I was going to do, and my CEO boss, Steve Reineman, walks into my home and says, let's have a cup of coffee. And I go, what's up? He said, I'm stepping down as CEO, I want to go back to Dallas, and on Saturday, the board is going to vote you in as CEO. And so the plane's waiting for you. Go see the head of the nominating committee, and then it's up to you what you want to do next. I'll come back on Friday, and look at all the announcements. And then he left. First of all, I was in shock because Steve was just a fantastic CEO. He was a dear friend. He was a mentor. I learned so much from him. And we both had planned to retire together. And then he was leaving. Suddenly, I was just not ready for it. Second is the thought of having to get all the announcements done, the whole chain that had to be put in place was a lot of work. And I was worried about who's going to organize the house because I had to do that piece of work too. So I said, okay, forget the house. I couldn't tell my husband. He was in India taking care of his father. I couldn't tell him because I was afraid he would tell somebody about it. So I could only tell him at the last minute, just in time for him to fly here for the announcement and go back. So everything had to be done. I couldn't tell my mother, my sister, nobody about it because it was highly confidential. And once all the administrative work was done, I sat there going, oh my God, Monday morning, my life's going to change. Everybody's going to be focusing on me. Probably going to write all kinds of stupid things about me too. How am I going to cope with this? How are my kids going to cope with it? And is my life going to change at home? Is it going to change in the office? So rather than the glory of being a CEO, a fear overtakes you. And I think it's good to have that fear because that fear keeps you humble. That fear makes you strive to do things better. And I always believe that when you ascend, have two kinds of humility, intellectual humility and real humility. Just have it because it makes you a better person. So, believe me, the moment was not a jumping up and down, I'm going to be CEO, wow. It was like, holy shit, I'm going to be CEO. Okay, it was a fear. How about you, Reem?
I think if I look at the Expo experience, I didn't even know what an Expo was when I got the call by His Highness Sheikh Mohammed to tell me, Reem, you're going to lead on this. And I thought, did I hear right? An Expo? There's a great book Expo happening in Sharjah every year. Is that what it is? Or what is an Expo? Which is a question a lot of visitors had asked prior to us opening our doors. And I remember thinking to myself, so if I'm going to be doing this, well, let's find out what it is. And after some research, it was very clear that we needed to run a global campaign to compete with other nation states about winning and winning the world's confidence in Dubai to host. And we had about 18 months or so. Thankfully, there was a great team. One of them is sitting here. Her name is Manal Al-Bayat. She was part of that team before. So she had set up everything. And and I think, and I mentioned Manal, as I had mentioned my team earlier, it's because there's a continuity. Indra speaks about Steve. It's not about one person, quote, shining. It's about a community of real hard-working people that always put the task first, and they always put themselves, I don't want to say last, because that's also a problem, right? And we need to pay more attention to ourselves, to our health, to our well-being. But it's important to honor the work that has been done, is being done, and will be done down the line. So that call probably was one of those moments that I guessed it was big by virtue of the discussion, but I had no idea what it was. I literally did not know what it was that I was going to have to deliver against.
And now Reem's going to write a book on how to create an expo. Just see how far we've come.
Can we launch it at the Emirates Lit Fest, please?
Who knows, Ahlam? Who knows? Maybe in a couple of years you'll see that book out there.
But how did your family react?
I think very similarly. They didn't know what an expo was either. But if I take that a few years before, when I was appointed as a minister, I remember being very, flabbergasted. I thought it was a maqlab. It was like a not a joke, like a prank. That really how I just got back from Washington. I had served for a number of years there. I couldn't process it until I actually saw my name out in the news, having that announcement already made. But my family have always been very supportive, and my friends have always been very supportive. And I think what's really important is that for the people who are really close to you, you don't change much. People assume that you become a different person. You should grow. I hope we all grow by virtue of the circumstances we see and the journeys we take. But I'm sort of the same person that I always was from a spiritual sense and from an intrinsic sense. And I think that keeps me grounded. It speaks to the humility that Indra mentions, because we do need to remember that positions come and go. One day you're this, next day you're not. And that's healthy and beautiful. It's also the cycle of life. When you're much younger, you can run 10 kilometers. Sometimes when you're older, you struggle a lot more because your body changes and your health changes, and that's just the way it is. So I'm very, I don't want to say comfortable, but I understand, and I've been sort of not waiting, but I understand that everything has its time and its place. And I'm here, I'd like to also mention my other colleagues who are ministers, and of course the male ministers are amazing, but the female ministers are incredible. And people like Shamma, who's our Minister of Youth, who's really taking youth portfolios to the heart of it, or our Minister of Happiness, or Hood, who looks at how do you integrate happiness in a government legislature, government policy perspective, or Noura, who does culture, or Hassa, who does community development, Jamila, who manages all the kids coming into the Expo site, and many, many more. We're a small bunch, but we're a fierce bunch. And here I mention them also because they are part of that support network. And we all need different support networks with each other and for each other. And I think that our biggest responsibility as we achieve more in life is to make sure how many more are going to achieve and be better than me. That's my duty, is to find, Indra spoke about how many other Reems. There has to be so many more, and they have to do so much better, because the UAE deserves that. And how selfish to think otherwise. So I'm really happy to always be approached by younger folks who want to do more and who find the work that I've humbly been able to put forward as a measure of inspiration. That's something I take super seriously, because I feel that that's the only way you can have good progress and everything that this nation deserves, and even by extension what the world deserves.
And Indra, I was going to just say,
my family support. The week that I was told I was going to be CEO, I called my husband on a Friday because I waited for the markets to close. And I called him and said, you have to fly to the US right away, because Monday morning they're going to announce that I'm CEO. And you can't talk about it in India because it's all confidential. He never asked questions. He flew straight here, and he got here Sunday night. I called my mother, who was in New York, on Saturday, and I said, Mom, I've got something very, very confidential to tell you. Steve Reinemann is stepping down, and I'm going to become CEO. She said, oh, no, you don't want to be CEO. You have 2 daughters. You have a husband. You don't want the CEO job. You're president, that's plenty. I will call Steve. He will listen to me. Because Steve and she had a wonderful relationship. He will listen to me. He needs to stay on. You don't need the CEO job. I said, Mom, that's not how it works. I think the deed is done. And she was really upset that I was going to be CEO, because she said, do you want even more responsibility? Why? I wish she had taken a minute to say, I'm proud of you. That didn't cross her mind at all.
But also going back to when, because of all women, but particularly women in the Indian culture or the Arab culture, there's a social responsibility where the value or the weight is always placed a lot more on the family life, your role as a wife or a daughter or a mother. And, the day that you became president, for example, the crown at the garage comment.
It's true, it's interesting, because she's always told me to leave the crown in the garage, and said, don't bring your power into the house. power stays outside the house, humility inside the house, which I'm okay with. I think that's the right message. But again, I want to be careful that I'm sensitive to the region also. I just think that men should also leave their power in the garage. And when you come home, both of you are responsible for the family, because too often we've said family is female. Why is family just female? Okay, family is husband and wife taking care of the kids. And so I think that where the discussion has to change, the narrative has to change, the thinking has to change, is to say that don't put a crown on the man when he comes into the house and take the crown away from the woman when she comes into the house. Both of you leave the crown in the garage, leave the power behind, because people at the home don't work for you. Come in and treat them as family and, do it together. And I think today my mother would say that, but those days she was still stuck in this notion about don't take a promotion, just say no. The concept of president, the concept of a CEO to her was like only more work, not necessarily a crowning achievement. It's like, how much more work are you going to do? So, as a genuine mother is concerned, but at some point you want your mom to say something different. They don't.
And I mean, multi-generational cohabitation is not an easy thing, but at the same time, it's a necessary thing at many times when both partners are working and there's children in the house. And what's your experience been?
Somebody ought to do some research on how to make multi-generational living work, because it has lots of benefits and it has lots of challenges, okay? The single biggest challenge, there's love for multi-generational, parents, it's all great. The biggest challenge is that your parents want to bring up the grandkids like they brought you up. Doesn't work that way. This is generations change, lifestyles change, everything changes. And I know that when my mother was living with me, and I write about it in the book, we had bedtimes. We say 8 o'clock, the baby goes to sleep. She said, what's wrong? It's a baby. She's watching TV with me till 10 o'clock. Mom, no. She goes to bed at 8 o'clock. She says, I brought up 3 kids, all 3 are successful. What are you teaching me about bringing up kids? How do you answer that question? So my husband would go crazy. I say, shush, just stay quiet. She's my mother. She's an older person. You have to treat her with respect. Say, I want Preeta in bed at 8 o'clock. She has to get into that discipline. He never won that. So what happens is there's tension between the husband and wife. And so you have to somehow smooth things over. So in addition to the job, in addition to everything else, you have this additional pressure. And I always tell Raj, do a balance sheet. Think of all the benefits we get having my mother. Forget these small issues. But it's like you become the head of the United Nations.
It's difficult because there's huge gaps between generations, particularly now it's skyrocketing, because there was a time when you could go to your father or even grandfather or grandmother and say, give me advice. They would give you relevant advice that would genuinely benefit you. But today, parents of today don't know what the world's going to look like in 5 years, so how could they possibly prepare?
That's a challenge. Although, there has to be some intergenerational responsibility. I think that the generations following have to take care of their elders, because we cannot leave the older generation to be lonely. We just cannot. I think we owe them a debt of gratitude. We owe them that respect. How we make it all work is still a work in process.
Yeah. And Your Excellency, the generations of millennials and afterwards, more and more we want fluidity in everything. I think the generation before millennials kind of mostly value stability in everything, and I think these two things are, even for people who have thrived in in the corporate environment, growing in a linear way, whereas today, young people want to diversify in skill sets. They want to not be bound by one industry or one job, or they want to do different things every other year. Do you think that the corporate world is preparing for this kind of fluidity?
Successful corporates are, but I don't think it's a homogeneous, matter-of-fact reality. You know, we've all been in workshops where they talk about the future of work. We've also all researched what type of skills do we need to teach our children, because we know that schools aren't actually enough. So I think, you know, when you look at intergenerational stories, one thing that's really important is that our value system continues to pass generation to generation to generation. And what Indra says about honoring our elders and respecting their opinions, even though, you know, I had the 7 o'clock train that leaves, right? So if the kids are not in bed by 7 o'clock, the train will leave. Of course, it was a concept that my family never really quite understood, but it was a dogma I went through because it was the only way I could ensure a quote-unquote peaceful night. But those are and they always say, I'm sure you've heard it, look, I raised you in a completely different, you turned out quite okay, so why the organic and why the no sugar and why, you know, all of that. But I think, you know, in a more serious tone, the world around us is not just changing, it's changing a lot more quickly than it ever had to change in the past. And so all of us, young and old alike, across different generations, have to figure out how to adapt more easily and how to cope more easily. And so that sense of agility and sense of coping to different environments is going to be a central tenet of how successful we may or may not be. Gone are the days where you're in a job for 10 years or 20 years. I think that ship has sailed and nobody really believes it. Even corporates who see folks, you know, jump from job to job, industry to industry, recognize that this is all part of that new generation. But corporates who don't see ESG, who don't see value in youth, who don't honor climate, who don't have, you know, a culture that is neither discriminatory nor racist nor you know, sexual harassment, all of those things are those that aren't going to really be able to thrive in the future. And I think that's becoming more and more evident for entities that actually do want to propel their industry and be leads in that industry. Here, I'm going to just mention Pepsi.
Actually, Reem, I want to pick up something on what you said. I'm going to add something. I think corporations that don't have childcare support for their female employees will have a tough time retaining extraordinary female talent. Because at the end of the day, if you want women in paid work, and there's a lot of talent among women that can contribute to the economy, and you also want them to have families, I think for both men and women, if you offer childcare facilities, it'll be great. Is Dan Cathy here? Where's Dan? Dan. So Dan Cathy is the person whose family started Chick-fil-A in the US, perhaps the most successful chicken chain. And Reem has tasted Chick-fil-A and she says it's terrific. So I'm a vegetarian, so I wouldn't know. But Dan's promised to get me some vegetarian food at Chick-fil-A. Dan told me that in their campus, they have a huge childcare facility for families. And there are 700 kids in the childcare facility, 0 to 5. We need more corporates as progressive and as forward-thinking and family-friendly like Chick-fil-A, because at the end of the day, you know, somebody used this expression, they said, women represent the biggest emerging market opportunity in all our countries. The biggest emerging market opportunity. If we can tap into their brilliance and somehow have them contribute to the paid economy while also being family builders, just imagine how much more the GDP can grow and how much more talent we can bring into the service of the country. What we need is the kind of family-friendly policies that, you know, Dan Cathy was talking to me about.
Absolutely. And do you think remote working is a positive thing, or do you think it takes away from the human connection or company culture?
This is one that troubles me. You know, I think that flexible work, working maybe 3 days a week in the office, 2 days from home, all of those are possible because technologies have progressed. However, I'm worried that this might create two classes of citizens. And let me give you examples of two classes of citizens. One is in the office, those that come to work versus that don't come to work. And if the men come to work and the women don't come to work, don't disadvantage the women. I worry about that. The second thing I worry about even more, all our essential workers, the people who work in factories, trucks, the people who work in the restaurants, they have to come to work every day. But the people in the office now can work from home. What you're really saying is the people who get paid much less than the people who are in the offices have no flexibility. They have to get up in the morning and show up at work, while others can roll out of bed and just get on Zoom and have a meeting. Again, it creates two classes of citizens. And finally, I don't know how you build a corporate culture without that human interaction. I don't know how you assess for leadership talent, whether somebody can really interact with people and do a good job developing leaders if you don't have people come in. So this is one I'm torn. On the one hand, I see the value of eminent flexibility. On the other hand, I see the loss when you engineer too much flexibility into this. So I think we have to do some experiments over the next year or two to get to the right balance.
There's so many questions I want to ask you both. I'm lost, and I do want to give some time for the audience to ask as well. But I want to ask, both of you leading such large organizations, how much you felt the weight of using that influence in bettering the world outside of your mandate in the organization. Your Excellency.
Well, as CEOs running public companies where we're responsible to shareholders primarily and then to the other stakeholders, you can't veer too much off the mandate. You've got to deliver on your mandate. But what you can do is execute the mandate in a very sensitive way. So let's go back to why do companies have limited liability for those lawyers in the room? Because they are supposed to have a duty of care to society. What we've forgotten is the duty of care to society. So I think if you really look at the risk factors in any company's financial submissions, why do you have 5 pages of risk factors if you don't have metrics to solve those risk factors? To me, that's what ESG metrics are all about. And if you have the right ESG metrics which come out of your risk factors, you de-risk the company and you actually are very sensitive to the societies in which you're operating in. So I think there's a way to link ESG to shareholder value, to being very, very conscious of communities and societies and leaving a positive imprint everywhere you operate. We need to make the connection. We need to teach CEOs and young executives how to make the connection and not think of ESG as an extracurricular activity.
Yeah. And this is something that we see clear examples of in Indra's book. So please do get a copy and read it. There's a lot more that we haven't discussed today. Your Excellency, do you have holiday plans after Expo, and can we know what they are?
You will never know what they are. Nobody will. But I am planning on some time off with my family. But also I wanted to just say that it's important to take time off almost every day. And I think I'd like to just go back for a second to how we take care of ourselves as individuals. Forget about being the CEO or being the minister, independent of where you are. I think the balance between work and family is something that it's not easy, but it's something we have to strive for. And in that journey is better understanding you and taking care of you, your health, your mental well-being, your sense of self, your spirituality, all of that. It's so, we neglect ourselves, especially as women. We neglect ourselves so much. A small anecdote. I've been trying to get a massage for the last 2 years. And every time I'm just about to actually book, I think, oh, I should actually be with the kids. Maybe I should actually, do that conference call. And even the people I work so closely with, it's become a bit of a joke. So did you book that massage? We'll book the massage. We'll put it in your calendar. Of course, 10 people have access to my calendar. So I feel like they're working so hard. I'm getting a massage. All of these doubts trickle into your mind. So, you know, a well-deserved time off for the whole team and myself, inshallah, when Expo is finished. But more importantly, every day we should have moments that are for us, moments that are for our kids, our families, our parents, etc., where we sort of pause and just reflect. Otherwise, it just takes such a heavy toll. My, inshallah, holiday won't be that long because I've managed to, notwithstanding the massage that never happened, actually try to carve out those moments every day. And so if there's any kind of message I'd like to share on a personal level is for all of those who work 24 hours a day to find some time within that relentless, difficult schedule. And both of us have seen very kind of aggressive work schedules to just pause for a bit. And it's not as easy as I make it sound, and I myself struggle with it, but it's probably one of the best things I've learned working on Expo, because I actually haven't taken a vacation in years. But I think that by being able to do this every day, it's helped me withstand the stamina, the necessary stamina to be able to still keep going.
That's great advice. Thank you so much.
So for your vacation, come to Connecticut, where I live, and I'll make sure you get a massage every day with the best masseuse.
Sounds like a plan. So we have 10 minutes left. If you'd like to ask a question, please put your hand up. There will be a mic that comes over to you. Please keep the questions short so that we make the most of our speakers' times. Yes, in the third row, in the red.
Very short question. His Excellency, Her Excellency. She spoke about child support. What about the talent retention and talent attraction? Don't you think it's also very important?
You mean in a business environment?
Yes, in any corporate business environment.
So this sort of goes back to the corporate culture that Mrs. Nooyi spoke about when she said it's difficult to strengthen a corporate culture if you have half your staff who are working remotely. How do you make sure that the good people, or actually how do you make sure that all your employees are thriving in a culture that has a work culture that has integrity, that has respect, that has opportunity and excellence in delivery? And those are some of the values we've had in Expo. When you include in the corporate culture the prism that I don't see you as an employee, I see you as a human who has dependents, who need support. And by the way, this discussion also includes insurance, because insurance, children of determination or children who struggle with physical or mental disabilities, as well as moms and dads who have small kids who don't have enough support. That's something that we must continuously try to strive towards. When we have lost talent at Expo, and we have, it was less because of child support and more because of the pressure of this program. Because it's not like a regular corporate. We've had to do so much in such little time. And so that was where we've actually lost talent in the last couple of years of this journey.
Great, thank you. Yes, in the front.
Thanks, and Sally Edwards from Dubai Tourism, and it's our honour to be partners with the session today with three such inspirational women. My question's about girls' education. Indra, you write about it early on in your book, and Your Excellency, it's a theme as part of Expo, both with the Women's Pavilion and through the Sustainable Goals. We know, and there's lots of conversation around girls' education, helping to improve the poverty cycle, break the poverty cycle, and then obviously improve innovation, sustainability, health, so many things. What can we actually do about this to actually make a change to girls' education globally?
Well, I tell you, if you think like an economist, okay, and say that every country needs the best resources to be deployed in the growth of the GDP of the country, given that 50% of the population is women, and let me give you some statistics on the United States, and then you can talk about it in the region. 70% of high school valedictorians in the US are girls. 70%. More than 50% of college degrees are gotten by women. Professional degrees, more than 50% are gotten by women. In selective schools where STEM is taught, like MIT and Georgia Tech, women have 1 whole point of GPA higher than the men. So I look at this and I go, if there's such a potent talent pool in women, how do we get them into the paid work and keep them there? Because the competitive advantage of any country, city, state, whatever, is talent. That's really what's going to make a difference going forward. At this point, I think this whole group of women, we draw a very small percentage and encourage them to continue working. I think if we figure out a way to keep them in colleges and universities as they are today, but then provide the support structure for them to contribute, I actually believe we have the potential to grow our GDPs faster. So I'm very optimistic of what can happen, but I'm giving you US statistics. I don't know, Reem, what the numbers are in the region.
I think beyond the economic, the problem is the economic argument is so compelling. One would say, then why not completely integrate women in society, independent of the US or Africa or the Arab world? I think a lot of the challenges we're seeing in girls' education is being held back because of religious or cultural beliefs. And I think that's where we need to really advocate for the fact that our religion, as Islam, does not conflict or contradict the right of every young Muslim girl to get a full-fledged education just as her brothers would. And that's where, maybe that's where our responsibility, when you ask what more can we do? Well, we need to go back to the edicts of the Islamic faith and say, there's nothing in the holy scriptures of the Quran, there's nothing in the prophetic traditions of Rasul alayhi salatu salam, the Prophet Muhammad, that was against girls studying. So why in all of these communities, girls are not allowed to study? Girls are not facilitated access into schools. So I think there's a big advocacy role. When you combine the advocacy role with the economic argument and say societies will thrive, communities will thrive, the economy will improve because there's going to be more opportunity, then hopefully you begin to push the needle a little bit. But I'm quite disappointed when I see the religion card being used, because we know that in Muslim faith it's not that. And I think that the responsibility continues to remain in Muslim nations and even Muslim women to advocate, and frankly Muslim men. Right? This is not women who need to support women. This is everybody who needs to support everybody, because everybody has a daughter, a niece, a mother. They are too integral in society for us to marginalize them from society. It's relentless. We have to be persistent. We have to just never stop, really, because there will always be voices that want to take us back. And we have to keep being determined to just never stop.
One of the most memorable visits I had in the region, maybe it may have been the same time that I came for the Expo. I was in Saudi. And we went to inaugurate one of our new manufacturing plants. And next door to the plant was a very big R&D facility for PepsiCo. If you looked at all of the people who came for the inauguration, they were all men from Saudi. There was me. And when we went to the R&D center, 100% of the staff there were women. 100% were women. And the best products for PepsiCo for Saudi and the region came out of that R&D center. So I think that if we gave them the right opportunities, the right infrastructure, and encouraged them, look, the sky's the limit. And, the speech that the industries minister from Saudi gave, lauding those women, gave me a lot of hope to say that even Saudi recognizes that, the talent of the women who can contribute enormously to the country is there. We just have to acknowledge it and do something about it. So.
Great. I think we have time for one more question at the front over here. Gentleman in the white.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Ramzi Qannati from Bahrain. There's a lot of wisdom to be gained from success stories, but also from failures. So if there's anything you can share, and if I can sneak in another one, as a parent of 2 daughters, what kind of advice do you have also as parents? Thank you very much.
Oh, I have 2 daughters too, so welcome to the club. First of all, the fact that you have 2 daughters means you're going to have somebody that loves you all your life. More than your wife, it's the 2 daughters that will just adore you. So consider yourself incredibly lucky. Daughters are also a challenge, okay? Somehow when they get to be teenagers, they go from being daughters to monsters, and then they become normal again later on. So you have to go through that rite of passage. And the person that hurts the most is the mom. I'll speak from my perspective. Daughters use moms as a punching bag. And they know how to put the knife in, turn it, and pull it back out and put it back in. So, but they still love you. So the love part I love. So good luck to you. Think about all that I said to you today. In terms of failures, if you didn't have failures, you wouldn't be successful. Because it's failures that harden you, failures that give you more resilience and courage. If you use the failures as a learning moment, as opposed to thinking about how to blame others for your failures. So I've had lots of failures in my life. There's not enough pages they give you to write about it. Lots of failures. But every failure, you've got to stop and say, what did I do wrong? What could I have done better? And what has this taught me about myself, the way I operate and the way I think? And if you document those lessons for yourself and learn from them, then those failures make you a better person. And I hope all of us have failures, because it makes you humble in many ways. And it's a good thing to have. Don't get down if you have failures.
I mean, it's hard to follow that act. Definitely failures have shaped a lot of my thinking. I look back at some of the regrets I've had, some of the poor decisions I've made, and I tell myself, what have you learned from that? How do you grow from that? Because the worst thing is to keep failing in the same thing again and again. Then you're just a fool, because you're not recognizing the failure for what it is. It is an opportunity to learn. And we all need plenty of opportunity to learn so we can elevate and strengthen and serve in a better way. I don't have daughters, but as a daughter, I agree with Indra. I'm obsessed with my father. He is everything in my life. And so, mashallah ala al-banat, you're going to be the apple of their eye for a very, very long time. ويتربون في عزك إن شاء الله وعز أمهم إن شاء الله.
Your Excellency Reem Al Hashimy, Mrs. Indra Nooyi, this is a conversation that we will cherish for a very long time. That is all the time that we have for today. I'd like to also thank the audience who's joining us remotely from home, virtually today. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you to all of the wonderful audience that have been here today listening to this conversation. We'd also like to thank our title sponsor, Emirates Airline, our founding partners, Dubai Culture, our session sponsor, Dubai Tourism, and our parent organization, the Emirates Literature Foundation, and of course, Expo 2020 for hosting us here today. Thank you for this wonderful conversation.
And on behalf of Reem and me, thank you for doing such a lovely job. Thank you, Asma.
It is my honor. Thank you.
Thank you all.